the people who have been waiting for a long time here, and that would be Daryl, who is in Michigan. Welcome, Daryl. Thanks for waiting. You're on Trunk Nation.
Hey, Eddie. Thanks for taking my call. Hey,
sure.
First, a couple of things. I want to thank you for introducing me to Rival Sons about 4 years ago. They are top of my list of new bands, and I can't stop listening to Feral Roots. So, and then
have you, Daryl? Have you spent time with any of their other records?
I have them all.
Yeah. I mean, there's some great stuff scattered, great stuff across those records as well, but I think Feral Roots is the best top to bottom myself.
Yeah, there's not a weak song on it at all, but the catalog is still pretty strong. And then having Bishop Gunn on this week, actually through my wife and her musical travels, I've known those guys for about a year, and Blackberry Smoke as well. She spent time with them at the Brothers and Sisters reunion that they have the last couple of years. And there's a few other crossover bands out there that are Whiskey Myers, who's also opening for the Stones. I've seen those guys live, and they're just as much rock as they're anything else. Even the country world doesn't know where to put them because country is more pop these days. But
There are so many exciting new bands out there right now. I just got sent a video the other day, and the name is escaping me, and they're probably going to kill me for the fact that I can't remember the name of the band. But they're a band. I think they're from Atlanta, and they're much harder. They're more of an AC/DC vibe, but I forget the name is right in the tip of my tongue. The publicist sent me the information. There's so many great up-and-coming new bands out there. And, more on the Southern rock tip, like you're talking about with Bishop Gunn or Blackberry Smoke, there is, one of the ones that I really want to have on, great guys, we just were hanging at Rocklahoma, is Blackstone Cherry. And that band is, as we were saying before, they're doing arenas in England. So, and they're great, great guys, and they really are. We spent a lot of time hanging and talking, and I gave them my number and stuff. We haven't connected yet, but we will soon, and I want to have those guys on to tell their story because they've made incredible strides they're an American band, but they made incredible strides outside of the U.S., and they're doing really well here also, and a killer live band as well. So what we have going on is we have brand new bands like a Bishop Gunn or a Dirty Honey or any of these guys we've had on, and many, many others. And then we have bands that have been around 10 years or so, like Rival Sons, who still haven't crossed over and broken completely to become household names, but there's still more tiers for them to climb, and they very well could, and they're still viewed as newer bands, even though they're really not all that new. So it's a great time. It's an exciting time. I'm very optimistic about where we're at with this next wave.
Sure. And then the other thing that, back in the day, before there were festivals of significance in the U.S., it was Europe. And approaching 50 this year, I've always had the bucket list of a European metal festival, Wacken being the holy grail. But in a couple of weeks, I'll be attending one with my best friend from high school, who's also 50 this year. And I never really hear you talk about European metal festivals, whether it's just lack of your experience in traveling over there or what. But this one's called Grass Pop Metal Meeting in Belgium, and we looked at the lineup top to bottom. Kiss is headlining one night, Slayer, Slipknot, Def Leppard, Whitesnake, Lynyrd Skynyrd. I mean, it's a great lineup, and just looking forward to it. But I didn't know if you had any insight in some of those festivals over there.
Unfortunately, I don't, Daryl, and the reason for it is exactly what you just said. It's a very, very limited lack of experience for me getting outside of the U.S. I actually, in the big picture, and thank you, Daryl, for the call. In the big picture, in my decades in the industry, I've only been outside of America very, very limited, very limited. So they're just the opportunities for me to do stuff outside of the U.S. mostly come because of the impact of that metal show airing in that territory. And that metal show never aired in Europe or England or anywhere, or even Canada. It did air in Central and South America and Australia. Now, I've never been to Australia, but I had a couple offers, but that's a haul. One day, maybe. But I've been through Central and South America and Mexico, obviously, quite a bit because my biggest base for people knowing me was that TV show, and it aired in those markets. So I've had very, very little experience. I've never been anywhere in Europe, believe it or not. I've been to England a few times, but I've never been to Germany, Sweden, France. I've never been any of that stuff over there. And one of the things I'm hoping for, if this TV show I'm doing on Access continues to grow, and we'll see how it does in the second season coming up, but covering festivals is to get outside of America and cover some of the festivals in other parts of the world. But obviously, that's a lot more expensive and a lot more time-consuming to shoot and leave the country. So that would be up to the producers and see where we're at that time. But the things I hear, I've been to download, and I was at it when it was called Monsters of Rock, which was 87, 88. And I've been to it when it's been called Download, because we did shoot an episode of that metal show there. But that's about it for me as far as experience. Now, what I hear is, yes, Wacken in Germany is a big one for the metal community. I hear great things about Hellfest in France. And Sweden Rock, I hear a lot of good things about. The one that Daryl is going to, I don't know much about, but the lineups are great. And, Daryl said something in his call. He said, before America became so well known for music festivals, the ones in Europe, most people will tell you, no, yes, we've had great strides with rock festivals in America. There are so many now, and some of them have gotten really good, okay? But most people who go to Europe to these festivals over there will tell you it's still not even close to what goes on in Europe. That's how much bigger it is there. And it's funny, somebody sent me a tweet or something the other day and said, Eddie, look at these huge crowds Kiss is playing to in Europe right now. They're festival shows. They're on festival shows. I'm not saying they're not drawing people, but I'm saying nobody looks at the whole picture of something. It's a festival. 15 bands played that day. A lot of smoke and mirrors that can go on with festivals, folks. Like I said, even in America, you got bands that headline days at festivals that if it wasn't the festival, they're playing a House of Blues the next day. There's a totally different structure when you're doing that sort of stuff. But I'd love to get over there and cover some more of those. There's some cool ones in Canada now. Heavy Montreal. There's a bunch of them throughout Europe. And a lot of them very diverse. Everything from death metal to hard rock to pop metal to whatever. They've got a little of everything. Let's get Peter, who's in South Carolina, on the air with us. Peter, you're on Trunk Nation on a Free-for-All Friday. What do you got today?
How are you, Eddie?
Great, thanks.
Just calling to talk about the passing of Bernie Torme, and I know it was discussed, briefly here and there on a couple of different shows, and I'm pretty sure that you guys also made mention.
We did. We talked about it the day the news came out, for sure.
Right. I was lucky enough to see almost every guitar player that played with Ozzy, and I did see Bernie Torme. I believe it was Nassau Coliseum with Joe Perry, Def Leppard, and Blizzard of Oz.
Well, I know Bernie definitely played the Madison Square Garden show. I don't know if he played Long Island, but he very well may have, because it would have been right around the same time. Yeah.
It was either MSG or Nassau Coliseum, and, I remember going to that show saying, what a monumental task this guy has, to step in at this time now. Oof, very, very difficult. And then shortly after, the Speak of the Devil tour, I got to see Brad Gillis. It was 2 nights at the Ritz on, I think it was 11th and 3rd.
Which is the nights they recorded the record. The Ritz is where they recorded Speak of the Devil or Talk of the Devil, depending on what country you get it in. But yeah, that was recorded at those shows.
Yeah. And, it's a shame because he did a lot of good work with Ian Gillan, Bernie Torme, and, I think he just got overlooked, because of,
the following into the shoes of Randy Rhoads really put him in a bad light, because what a tough situation to be put in,
I don't think him being overlooked, Peter, has anything to do with him following Randy Rhoads and doing those handful of shows. I mean, most people said, and Bernie himself said, that he was ill-prepared for that. He was thrown right into it. It wasn't his style of playing. He did the best he could given a very tough situation. I think the problem with Bernie getting any recognition in America as a guitar player is that much of the guitar playing he did outside of that, rough patch there with Ozzy for 4 or 5 shows, the music he made and what he was known for didn't make any impact at all in the U.S., so nobody even knew who he was because the Gillan records were not even a factor in America. They were completely off the radar. People don't know that stuff here at all. So that's the big problem. And then the thing he did with Dee Snider never came out in America and the label folded. So all of the things that he did in his career, which is way more than that brief stint with Ozzy, were completely off the radar in America and made no impact here. So that's why nobody really knew who he was.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. No. Oh,
it's unfortunate.
Festival...
Go ahead, Pete.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. The other festival in Europe isn't it Sonosphere?
Sonosphere was in Australia. I believe they were doing those in Australia, but I think that went out of business. Thank you, Peter, for the call. I don't hear much about Sonosphere anymore. But then they tried to roll that out around the country, around the world. They did a Sonosphere in England. They rolled it out and made it like a touring festival. But I believe that went bankrupt. I haven't heard that name in 3-4 years. I think that's not even happening anymore, the whole Sonosphere thing. But that was a thing at one point. But back to Bernie Torme, look, there are a long list of guitar players who are brilliant and influential that were not known in America and still aren't. Rory Gallagher. Glenn Tipton once told me he wouldn't play guitar if it wasn't for Rory Gallagher. Nobody, maybe more so than Gary Moore, who also sadly is no longer with us. I mean, Gary Moore... Kirk Hammett, on and on and on. I mean, Gary Moore is an icon to so many people and never had any sort of real huge commercial success in America. Laundry list of people like that, including a guy like Bernie Torme. And yeah, sadly, if you're a fan of those musicians, when they pass away, you wish there was more coverage. You wish that more people talked about it, celebrated their legacies. I get all that. But it's the reality is obviously that sort of attention and everything is always going to be directly related to how popular the person was. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. It's just how it is. A major artist that's super popular dies, there's going to be a ton of coverage. People who are fringe people in terms of popularity are going to get a mention, if that. It's just the way it is. Doesn't mean anything as far as their talent or influence.